Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
Breaking up is hard to do. Don't take your love.
And welcome back to The Law Show. Great old Neil Sedaka song here this morning as we were talking family law with David Halkett from Macquarie Hunter LLP in Surrey. David is the head of their family law section at Macquarie Hunter. He and a couple of other associates run that department. And David has brought a case with him. This is we're going to talk about residency now. The issues that we're talking about in the family law program today, guardianship, custody, and this one, residency. And David brought a fairly recent case. This is only a couple of years old, right?
That's
the
correct.
case is from the Supreme Court of British Columbia, and it involves, David, NAF versus CDM. And that's all we get to know. Why is that?
That's because the children were young, and so they try to, so that people couldn't search it up, they just do it by initials.
Oh, I
So
see.
two parties, but that's the party's initials.
Oh, I see. So this is the mom and the dad.
Yeah, that's correct.
But because there are children's privacy involved, this is the only thing the court will tell us in their official records.
Exactly. So the case will come up as the court pleadings will have the full names, but the decision will just simply have the initials.
Okay. Now tell us about this case and why it came to be.
Well, it was an interesting kind of case in that the parties resided in Squamish.
Okay.
They'd been together for about 9 years. And they had two children who were 4 and 7, and they all resided in Squamish, and they'd been there during their whole relationship. But the mom, she worked in Squamish as a child, youth, and family counselor, and the father was a chiropractor.
Okay.
Up there.
Professional people.
Yeah, exactly. And so just before separation, the mother advised the father she had met someone else that she was interested in, and so she was leaving him for this guy, and he happened to live in Kelowna.
Okay.
And so she goes up with the children for a visit, and I guess the dad agreed that they could go up on a short trip to Kelowna, except the mom decided she wasn't returning. And so she never moved back to Kelowna. She decided to Squamish. She stayed in
took
Kelowna.
them for a visit to Kelowna and never came back.
Exactly.
Oh, my.
And so she got a job in Kelowna as a counselor, and there was no agreements or orders, so it was a fresh application. And so the mom then decided to start an action without notice, seeking a protection order, claiming past violent behavior towards her. It wasn't allegations about the father, but against the children, but with respect to her. So she was claiming family violence, and she wanted a protection order.
Okay, now let me just understand just the legalities of this. I'm a civilian here. I'm desperately trying to keep up with you, David.
Sure.
But so before she informs him, I've fallen for some other guy, and I'm thinking of moving to Kelowna, I'd like to take the children up for a visit. The husband says, well, I guess I don't have much choice here. Off you go. Had any legal proceedings been undertaken by either party to indicate a dissolution of that marriage?
No, she just said that she had met someone and that they just before separation.
So no paperwork had been
Nothing
filed.
had been filed. No, there
so
was no
she
agreements or
blows
anything.
town with the kids and doesn't come back.
That's correct. And then when she was in Kelowna, she decided to start a court action there, seeking a without notice protection order against him, and obtained one, saying that he was violent towards me and I had no contact order in effect.
I see.
So what
now,
happened?
how do you get that order when you're hundreds of miles away from home? Who gives you that order, and based on what evidence?
Well, it would have been on her. I'm assuming it was
he said, she said kind of thing?
Exactly. It would have been Supreme Court of British Columbia, so she would have filed an affidavit and an application, and it was without notice to him, so he didn't know about it. She went into court without notice and obtained the order. Now, when you're applying for a without notice order, you're supposed to give a full view of what's been going on. Now, when people are preparing their own application, they tend not to give both sides as much.
Right.
So she painted him to be probably about as bad as possible. So
all of this unbeknownst to him.
Exactly. And the reason for this is she wanted an order, no contact, so she could stay up in Kelowna.
Sure.
That's what it was, right? And it says here in the case that she didn't advise the court that she already moved to Kelowna, and that without notifying the father.
And was the application filed in Kelowna?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So when she was up there, she obtained it.
I see.
So what she did is she moved, didn't tell him I had moved. She just says I'm in Kelowna, and basically assuming that he had given permission to move, but he never given permission.
And so she goes up, gets a job, settles in with this new guy.
Yep.
The kids, I guess, are sort of going along for the ride. Not that they have any choice.
Yeah,
in
they
the
were
matter.
7
They're
and
little
4,
kids,
so
right?
Exactly. They don't know any
And
different.
so Dad is back home being a chiropractor in Squamish going, basically, what on earth is happening here?
Exactly. So what had happened is the court found that she moved to Kelowna mostly to further her relationship.
Right.
By the time they got to their application.
Sure.
And with her new partner. And that's always a factor when you look at it. But while the move was also beneficial, the fact that there was no evidence that these children were unsafe near with the father, the court decided, at least in the interim, to move her back to Squamish to be closer to the father. So the children had to return. She doesn't have to go.
Oh, I see.
But, they said, look, the children are going to have to be back there.
And was this just a decision of the court, or by then had Dad say, hello, I'm in the picture here, hello?
Well, Dad would have had to have been served with the protection order.
Okay.
So once he's served, then he says, what is this? He brings his application, set it aside, and the court says, in the meantime, you're going to move back until we make a full determination.
And so the court can order
Yes.
a change of address.
And that's happened to me once before. And it was even worse than this because my client had agreed to the dad taking the child to Quebec, to Montreal for a short bit, and then he calls her from there and says, I'm not coming back.
Oh, brother.
So we had to apply here on a rush basis, similar to this, and then hire counsel back in Quebec to enforce the order.
Right.
So finally, the dad was ordered back with the child. But it happens all the time. That's why it's so difficult when parents, if it's not a good relationship, or even if it is one, everyone thinks it's fine, whenever someone agrees to go on a holiday with the children, you never know what's going to come down the
So
pike.
let's wrap up this case, though, because I'm dying to know how it worked out. So Dad gets into the picture, finally has his voice heard.
Yep.
The court orders Mom to take the two kids back to Dad in Squamish. The court doesn't particularly care whether Mom returns to Squamish, but those two kids are going back
Exactly.
home.
So obviously Mom goes back with them, and then this was only an interim application. So obviously the issues would still be there when it came to a final. It may not have been reported, but this was an interim. So that what they were saying is, we're not going to let you stay in Kelowna now, and basically then say 2 years from now when you get to trial, or a year or whatever, say, well, I've been living here for a year and a half. The kids are settled.
Right. Plead residency.
Exactly.
Right.
You have to go back and argue that it's best for them to move.
Okay.
At the end of the day.
So how did this shake out? What was the upshot of it all?
I've never seen the final decision. And this, so sometimes these things get settled up and they never actually report a decision. This was just on the interim application.
Interesting, because you also said whether it takes a year or two for your case to come to trial, is this a typical time frame? If you decide, for whatever angry reason, usually, that they're going to get that son of a gun, if it's the last thing you do, and you're going to see him in front of a judge, just stripped down for the whole world to see, that the chances of that resolving positively are quite limited, aren't they?
They can take a long time to get resolved.
So is it 1 to 2 years a typical wait time to see a judge?
Well, you can't get divorced for a year anyway.
Okay.
So by the time you get your final order, it can be separated for a year and a half, 2 years. Depends. It also depends on how long your trial is and where you are. In Vancouver and New Westminster, and in those registries, it's faster. In the outlying areas, it can be quite a bit longer.
Okay, so nothing. Well, first of all, it's important to note, just for the record, that nothing happens within a year, usually anyway, right?
For a final resolution, yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, usually.
And is that, very quickly, just before we go to break, you said earlier, divorce is federal.
It
and
is.
a divorce can only be granted by a federal judge.
Federally appointed,
So do you have to go to court when all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and everybody's okay, and it's time for your divorce? Do you have to show up, or can you just get something done on paper?
If you've resolved everything else, you can get an uncontested divorce. You send it in just on affidavits.
Right.
And the court just grants the divorce.
It's just
assuming you meet
rubber
all the-
stamped and
Assuming
that's
you
that.
meet all the criteria, yeah.
Okay. Our guest is David Halkett from Macquarie Hunter LLP. They are in Surrey at Central City. They are a full-service law firm. David is the head of the family law section on The Law Show here on CIL 650, with a lot more still to come right after this.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CIL 650.